Zendikar Rising has some truly insane artifacts. Today we're going to talk about what I call the God Engine and the Godstone. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. In a slight departure from how I normally do these videos, there were actually two separate spoiler cards that I literally couldn't decide between. I was like, okay, which one do I want to do a video on? They're both so cool, I want to talk about them both. Now, before I do that, you know what, since I'm wearing this shirt, let's take the opportunity to point out that down in the merch section, there are now 3 different variations of my merch based on your feedback. So we have this glorious rendition. You can now get this printing, but just without the shield. So if you don't want the logo, you can get it with just this awesome owner of fine luxury cardboard rectangles part. If you like the shield just on its own, you can get a shirt with the shield up here. So you got 3 options. You can go logo here, this version, or no logo version. Up to you. Enjoy them any way you so choose. Okay, now that that is out of the way, let us talk about the God cards. These God Engine and Godstone cards. Let's start with what I'm calling the God Engine. I really like this card. It's a lithoform engine. It's obviously the one that's been on the screen for the entirety of the time that I've been talking, so you already knew which one I was going to start with. So this feels like a very important story element card. Honestly, it's got story spotlight on it, right? So I mean, that's a little bit of a crib note. But before even seeing that, I was like, okay, wait. If you've watched the trailer for Zendikar, you will know what this is based around. If you didn't watch the trailer, to give you a really small summary of it, essentially Nahiri goes up into the Skyclaves with 2 other individuals to reclaim what really looks like a gigantic, ancient 20-sided die. They're actually, like, in real life history, people have found like ancient Egyptian dice or something like that. I don't know exactly where they hail from, so maybe I'm just tying it to Egypt because I watched Gods of Egypt last night. Don't bother, it's a terrible movie. Anyways, it looks like, I'm getting way off track here. Nahiri's got what looks like a 20-sided die, but what it is, it's a lithoform sphere. And this thing is so important to her that she has no problems with people losing their lives for her to get it, or taking people's lives to protect the secret of it, or just so the word doesn't get around, whatever it is. Either way, Nahiri's the villain of this set. The lithoform stone here, this is the last one that exists from the core people, and it's an insanely powerful item. And in this card, we actually see it being used in the construction of this massive engine. Now, I imagine that the engine probably already exists. I'm guessing the way it goes, now I don't know, but I'm guessing the way it goes is Nahiri finds the lithoform sphere that she needs in one set of ruins, and in another set of ruins finds a lithoform engine. Because I imagine that this technology, even though technically this is a legendary card, I imagine that there was probably one of these engines for each of the different Skyclaves. But I call this the God Engine because it is a massive creative force. So it's 4 mana for a legendary artifact that has 3 abilities. We actually covered this card before when we talked about the triple copier. That's what this is. And in all honesty, it far exceeds my expectations. 2 mana and tap it, copy target activated or triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Pay 3 mana and tap it, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. 4 and tap it, copy target permanent spell you control. The copy becomes a token. So one thing that I like first off is the sequential increasing of the activation cost. There's just something satisfying about the natural progression of 2 to 3 to 4 with the tap abilities. But either way, this is an engine that's capable of copying virtually anything that exists. Like anything in Magic, this thing can copy. It can copy activated or triggered abilities of cards you already have out, right? Or triggers from things, let's say you cycle a card from your hand, you could copy that if you want to. You can copy any instant or sorcery, and anything that's not an instant or sorcery in Magic is essentially a permanent, which can be copied by the final ability. even weird things, like you can't technically copy an emblem, but you can copy the ability that makes the emblem. So you can get multiple Planeswalker emblems. Essentially, you can copy virtually anything that you want. I was not expecting this level of insanity with the triple copying. Like the first two abilities, copy target artifact, copy target activator triggered ability, yep, totally. Copy target instant or sorcery, yep, totally. The final ability, I would have expected it to be more along the lines of copy one type of permanent, not any permanent. Now, what's interesting to note about this versus a lot of other copy effects, specifically with the copying target permanent, is it copies target permanent spell. So this means you can only make a copy of the permanent while it's on the stack. So if you want to copy a Planeswalker, artifact, creature, enchantment, anything like that, you have to do it as you've cast it. So this is a very like in the moment sort of copying thing too, right? This isn't something like, this card would be way, way stronger. And in fact, it would be too strong if you could just copy permanents you already had on the board, because you could just every single turn just be like, I'll make another one, I'll make another one, I'll make another one, I'll make another one, right? Like that honestly would be too strong. So having it keyed into any permanent, but only while it's on the stack, is a really interesting idea. And the artwork is pretty compelling as well. If you look down near the bottom of the artwork, you can see there's this light and then a kind of a darkened sphere on the top. That's going to be the lithoform. That's going to be the lithoform sphere, the object that Nahiri was originally after, right? And so she's placed it into the engine. And I really like the fact that at first, you may not notice it because I didn't notice it at first. I just looked at it and was like, oh, cool. You've got a sphere with all these pieces floating around. And you're like, okay, are they pulling in to protect it? Like, is this essentially when they talked about how each of the skyclaves was powered by what's the equivalent of like the power of a miniature sun? Is that the power of this lithoform sphere? Is this engine like being assembled before our eyes? Is it like pulling together and we're seeing it in the moments before it does? Or are these pieces just suspended by magic, and as it's creating things, all these pieces whirl around in a crazy storm around the sphere? Like, there's so much flavor to this, and this is going to be a key piece. But when you look at the main piece in the very front of the artwork, you can actually see Nahiri is reflected there. Like, she's basically standing just out of the frame, and it's like we're looking through her eyes, and you can see a reflection of her in that piece. So overall, this is a very cool concept for a card, a very powerful concept for a card. This is one that I feel like is just over time going to become more and more desired by more and more people. If you want an easy card that it feels like you can grab from the set that's going to go up in value over time, this is one of them. Like, it just it's who wouldn't want this? That's what it turns into. When you have a card that just goes, who wouldn't want me? You know? Like, sure, you can come up with arguments and go, well, Red Cavalcade wouldn't want it. Yeah, you're right, but so what? You know what I mean? Whoever owns, like when I say who wouldn't want this, it's not every single deck in Magic wants this. It's just every Magic player is probably going to look at this card and be like, oh, yes, yes, please. So the second card we have to talk about, I'm calling the Godstone, and I'll explain to you why I'm calling it that after we go through the card itself, okay? So this is Forsaken Monument. It's a 5 casting cost legendary artifact. Surprise, surprise. Creatures, colorless creatures you control, get +2/+2. This is not what I was expecting. When I saw the teaser saying we were going to get something that gave a particular group of creatures +2/+2, I thought it was going to be one of the standardized tribes, or maybe one of the lesser known creature types that people don't use as often as a tribal deck, right? So that was a surprise to me, but this is basically a massive colorless booster. So whenever you tap a permanent for colorless mana, you add an additional colorless mana. So this makes Sol Rings tap for 3 mana and so on, right? And whenever you cast a colorless spell, you gain 2 life. So this screams put me into like an artifact style deck. And the flavor text says, we shall forever roam. And that's Aili, High Priest of the Eternal Pilgrims. Now, the reason that I'm calling this the Godstone is actually because of a separate card that I believe this is another incarnation of, or at least something very, very similar to, all right? And that's the Eldrazi Monument, okay? So let's take a look at that real quick. It also is a 5 casting cost legendary artifact. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and have flying and indestructible. And at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature. If you can't, sacrifice the Eldrazi Monument. And the flavor text says, gods don't die, they merely slumber. Look at the name. Who sang it? Aili, Kamsa Cleric. So this is before Aili is the high priest of the Eternal Pilgrims. We're looking at a moment in the past. Now, the world of Eldrazi did have gods, or the world of Zendikar, I should say. I mean, the Eldrazi are so infused in Zendikar that it's almost interchangeable. But anyways, the Eldrazi were these massive Cthulhu-style horrors that went around causing untold destruction. But they ended up being sealed within Zendikar. And as a result, because they had such a large effect on the populace, religions sprung up around them. But they were like corrupted in terms of the worshippers of the religions had no idea that their gods were fake. You know what I mean? Like Emrakul became Emeria, stuff like that. Kozilek, Cozy. They were similar looking to the Phyrexian, good lord, I've been talking about the lore too much. They've basically, sorry, I just pulled myself way off thinking about the lore I'm making over on the other channel and Urza and all that. But regardless, the Eldrazi were essentially worshipped like gods, right? But not as the real deal. But this Eldrazi monument was actually in the Eldrazi form. Like, this wasn't one of those 3 gods. It was something separate, but treated like its own individual, like, god monument sort of setup. And the artwork on it's really intense. This thing that makes all your creatures +1/+1 flying and indestructible. It's pretty crazy. But take a look at the artwork, take a look at the monument itself. And now let's go back and take a look at Forsaken Monument. If you look in the background, doesn't it look like it's the same Eldrazi, just half submerged into the earth? In the center of this, you've got somebody who looks like they're like, kind of like curled forwards like this, otherwise known as how my back looks pretty much every day. So this guy, this is to me, is like the half submerged Eldrazi monument from the original Zendikar, right? Like, that's what this is. It's been converted, its very nature has changed, right? Before, the monument required a constant sacrifice of life to keep it going. And to me, this Forsaken Monument is that Eldrazi monument after it has been left by its people, right? Where they're no longer feeding life force into it, and it has fallen. It's fallen down from the sky and just kind of embedded itself deep in the earth. But because of the sheer power of this monument, that this still kind of resonates out. There's only one in existence. It's the same monument, but its very nature has been fundamentally changed. And I really do believe that the flavor text from Aili helps to cement that concept, because you could argue maybe it's just an interesting rock formation, but once you take everything together, it's pretty hard to deny that this is most likely the exact same monument. Now, another cool thing about Forsaken Monument is it's made an old school card, the Thran Lens, which is essentially a piece of garbage. Thran Lens is garbage. It's a 2 casting cost artifact. Put it out, and it makes all your stuff colorless. Well, with the Forsaken Monument, all of a sudden now all your guys, regardless of who they are, they're getting a +2/+2 boost, right? Bare minimum. And if you have, well, I mean, it doesn't matter as much for artifacts and things like that, but it's certainly a way to use this monument with any creatures you want. And I like the Thran's Lens. I like the Thran Lens from a flavor perspective because it shows how naive Urza was originally. Urza is a god-level planeswalker from the old days of Magic whose life was devoted to destroying the Phyrexians. And in his quest to destroy the Phyrexians, he stumbled on all this different Thran technology. And he was very impressed with the Thran. He loved the Thran, idolized them, worshipped them, without realizing that the Thran were the progenitors of the Phyrexians. So the Phyrexian menace that Urza's dead set against comes from the Thran. They literally speak like they have elements of the Thran language incorporated into Phyrexian language and their symbols and everything. So I just love that Urza's obsessed with the Thran and also obsessed with the Phyrexian on two completely different sides, idolizing and hating, and yet they're the same thing. How cool is that? Anyways, if you like that kind of stuff, you're interested in magic lore, I have a magic lore channel, and we're doing awesome old school magic lore, specifically talking about Urza and the beginning of Karn's life, Joyra, Teferi, all that stuff from all the way back at the beginning of the game. So if you want to get deeper in and love magic even more, come on over to Fantasy Geographic, my lore channel. Also, make sure to get yourself some sweet merch, my friends. That being said, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like what I'm doing here, like, comment, subscribe. If you don't like what I'm doing here, why did you stay to the end of the video? That's all for now. See you guys tomorrow.